Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. At Natal's Air Conditioning, our motto is service honoring the golden rule. We're dedicated to providing the best air conditioning solution for your home or business in the New Orleans metro area. More information is available at 504-821-0005. Natal's Air Conditioning, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we take a look at the Saints, LSU, and Tulane. Got a great panel for you tonight. Larry Holder, columnist for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and Chad Sabadie, reporter and anchor at Fox 8 Sports. And gentlemen, as always, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming down and joining us.
You got it. I feel like it's been a little while since I've been over here. Yeah. I had high hopes for the Saints, and
yeah, we all did.
I don't know if they're still there, but I think they're still there for me. A little bit,
no doubt.
1-2, not quite what we had in mind, but definitely not 1-3. You got to beat the Cowboys on Sunday night.
I'll tell you what, I never thought I'd be saying this for 3 games in the season, but it feels like a must-win. But before we get kicked off, let's tell the folks a little bit about what you guys are involved in. Larry, you moved from beat writer to columnist. Tell us a little bit about what's going on at NOLA.com and what you're doing.
Absolutely. I moved on from the day-to-day news where I'm just writing my opinion analysis. And, of course, it's wall-to-wall coverage for everything we do with the Saints. And, of course, we do a ton of work with Chad and Sean Fazan and everybody over at Fox 8 as we're partners together. And that's a great team that we have together. A lot of great knowledge. But, of course, writing my opinion. And, it's been a tough opinion so far as the Saints are 1-2. But, of course, every day in print, all the time online, NOLA.com, and, of course, in the print edition of Times-Picayune.
Yeah, no doubt. Chad, you guys, obviously, wall-to-wall coverage at Fox 8, and you've added a high school show as well. Tell us about everything you guys are doing.
Fox 8 Football Friday. We're really excited about the prep show. A lot of us have prep football roots. My days playing for Pope John Paul over in Slidell, so I remember how important it was to young men on a Friday night and really the whole community. So we've added that. It's going great so far, and, we like to say we've got the biggest sports team in town, and we really do, but then when you add on the partnership with NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, it's that more extensive, and you really are covering every aspect of the Saints, LSU, Tulane, the prep scene. So it's been a lot of fun. It's a privilege working in this market, hometown guys. So it's been a lot of fun to see the relatives and family and friends happy with the coverage. Maybe not the results so far, but happy with all of our coverage so far.
And, of course, we always try to finish it off with the final play each and every Sunday night.
That's right.
10:35, right?
10:35 on Sunday nights, and Fox 8 Football Friday at 10:35 tomorrow night. Coming at you.
There you go. Guys, the Saints get a win against Minnesota, their first win of the season. In the Dome, they're 1-2 now. The defense, they played a little better, but let's face it, the Vikings were a little bit crippled when you start talking about the loss of Adrian Peterson, losing their starting quarterback, even though I'm going to tell you right now, I thought Bridgewater did a nice job for a guy that just came into the game. I talked about it on Monday on my radio show. I thought he was going to be a one-read guy and then basically either run or dump it off to one of the safety valves. I saw the guy, as I went back and looked at the tape, going through his progressions. He hung in there, and I think the Saints ought to be happy they got him in week 3 rather than maybe week 10 or week 11. But with that said, Larry, we'll start with you first. Your thoughts, first of all, on how this defense is playing.
Well, there's no question they improved. And they actually improved in week 2, honestly. Once they finally made the move, and I'm not pinning it on Patrick Robinson, but they made the move to finally take him out, put in Corey White. It kind of shored things up a little bit. Of course, they had the bust at the end of the Cleveland game, and that really cost them. But you have to look at it in both ways. If they didn't improve against the Vikings, they'd be in major trouble. But the fact they did improve, didn't allow a touchdown, that's the first time that happened since 2012 under Spagnuolo when they shut out the Tampa Bay Bucks in Week 15. But the fact that they did improve, 3 field goals, it was the bend, but don't break. They didn't create turnovers. That's one major key I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot on this show. But the fact that they were able to improve, I think you're going in the right direction. Now it's going to be a major test against Dallas because they obviously have more weapons than Minnesota.
Yeah. Chad, what can you add?
Similar sentiment. It is a step in the right direction. I mean, you look at this defense, we had such high hopes. I mean, under Rob Ryan last year, they become this top 5 unit, The only thing that was missing was the takeaway, and that was the big mantra we heard the entire offseason. They're bringing in Jarris Byrd, the all-pro safety. He's got a knack for creating takeaways. And sure enough, Week 1 against the Falcons, he produced that, and I believe that's the last one that they've produced. They've been shut out in the takeaway department the past 2 weeks. For this defense to continue to improve, they've just got to find a way. Yeah. And I think it starts up front. We talk about Junior Gillette and Cam Jordan, Akeem Hicks. These are now household names. They're no longer young players with potential, under the radar. Junior said they didn't know our names last year. Now they do. Well, guys, you're kind of being held at bay so far through 3 games. You really need to step it up. So if they can get that pressure up front, of course that's going to help your secondary on the back end.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chad. I think that a lot of people have been really kind of honing in on the problems in defensive backfield. But really, if you want to look at the big problem right now, it is the lack of pressure on the opposing passer. I mean, automatically that will make the secondary better. Have you guys been able to put your finger on what's the problem here? These are the same guys as last year, a year older, a year in this system. You would think they would be much better.
Well, again, they were better against Minnesota. There's no question about it. You saw Junior Gillette and Cam Jordan get the pressure. They haven't gotten the sack numbers. And honestly, from those 2 guys, there actually have been more quarterback pressures than maybe people would anticipate. And it's because you see the low sack numbers, you figure, they're not getting to the quarterback. Actually, they are. What the problem is to me is in the middle. Look, Akeem Hicks, I feel like this is supposed to be a breakout year for him again. We're only in Week 3, well, through 3 weeks, but I would have expected more already from him. And but you can't also coat the fact that they've been juggling around the secondary. First week, they decided to go 3 safety look a lot of the game. Second week, they disappeared from that altogether. Yes. And then when they figured, we've got to do something, we only have really 2 cornerbacks that we trust now, it's Keenan Lewis and Corey White. They have to put Kenny Vaccaro back in the slot. And so, look, you can't discount what's going on in the back end. But you saw the results of pressure. They were able to sack Teddy Bridgewater twice. They were able to pressure him more, and Matt Castle as well. So you saw the downward spiral, I guess, for the pass offense. And so, look, they are moving in that direction, but I'm not completely sold, and I know you're not. I'm assuming, Chad, you're not. I'm not completely sold that this is the same defense we saw last year.
Yeah.
What can help is also more depth, more rotation on the defensive line up front. I think last year what really worked out were the younger guys, John Jenkins, Tyron Walker, Glenn Foster, playing their role and coming up with some key stops and key moments in the game. I can think of Tyron Walker against the Falcons last year, late in that game. This year, John Jenkins has been injured. The other guys have been in action a little bit, but it's just not as productive maybe, forcing, a lot of burden on Cam Jordan and Akeem Hicks and these guys in Bunkley in the middle. So if they can get that cohesive rotation going, that's going to free more things up and keep these guys fresh. I mean, NFL is 60 minutes of hard-nosed action. You can get spelled a little bit, and that's going to help you.
Chad, you mentioned Jenkins. Is it an injury with Jenkins right now, or is he just being outplayed?
Well, honestly, he's being outplayed. He's been demoted. He's a third-string defensive tackle. Brandon Dederick, who they signed him in the offseason, kind of an under-the-radar veteran player. He played his way onto the roster, and part of it is because he's versatile. He can play defensive tackle. He can play the nose. He can play some end as a 3-4 end when they do that sort of scheme. But he has jumped John Jenkins, and it's really curious to see what's happened because part of it has to do with the injury as far as him getting back into shape.
Yes.
But he was in shape and playing enough. to where the Saints, they saw what they saw, and they saw what they saw last year as well from John Jenkins, and they figured they needed to beef up. And so the fact Dederick is seeing more snaps, I mean, John Jenkins has been inactive, and he's been a healthy inactive the last 2 of the last 3 weeks. So, I think it's something to where the Saints are trying to figure out what they have with him.
He really came on last year. I really thought this was going to be a breakout year for him this year. Communication issues have been a problem in the first couple games. They cleaned it up a little bit in the Dome this past, but they're going on the road this week. Chad, your thoughts on that? A lot of people want to look toward the injuries that happened in the offseason and training camp that has hurt this team in terms of communication issues. What do you think?
Communication is so essential in this sport, in any given sport. You need to be in the right place to make the plays. I mean, you can run a 4.2 40, but if you're way on the opposite end of the field, you're not going to be in the right position. And I think there is a lot of validity to that with these guys missing some key time in training camp. You're not able to find that groove, develop that chemistry. They had a lot of parts coming in and out. Champ Bailey, was he going to be a part of this roster? Obviously, he's not here in New Orleans. Jarris Byrd being very, very limited. P-Rob, what was his future back in West Virginia? You know, you'd like to assume that these guys were developing that chemistry as the weeks went on and the preseason went on, but clearly they're behind. They need to continue to progress in that phase, and once they clean things up and make sure they're all on the same page, sure, that's going to help your secondary, but you still have to make those plays. You can be in position, but you still have to physically make that play, rip that ball out, make that tackle. I think tackling overall has improved, especially from week 1.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What can you add, Larry, to the communication issues?
There's no question, at least the first 2 weeks, it was a major problem. You saw the bust on that final drive in Cleveland. Literally, Jarris Byrd almost had to go run over, grab Patrick Robinson, and say, go with this guy. And then you even saw it with 2 guys who played together, Keenan Lewis and Corey White. But here's the thing, they played together, and yet last year, Corey White wasn't playing the slot, the nickel spot, and so they got confused, and a guy pops open, and then bing, bang, boom, game's over, and you lose. And so you saw there were some breakdowns against Minnesota. Matt Asiata, screen pass, he's standing alone. He goes for 41 yards, and Curtis Lofton, who played a heck of a game,
he really did,
chased him down. And you also saw a little bit of confusion on one of the Cordero Patterson pass plays when he cuts across the formation, and he's just standing there by himself, catches a little bubble screen, and shoots down the field. So it's not all fixed yet. We've seen some improvement. There's no doubt. Like I said, Minnesota, the defense certainly improved, but there are certainly problems along that. It's not a complete product. And you go back to some of the things where they missed time in training camp, and you bring up Jarris Byrd. He didn't take a team snap in practice until week 1. And the guy came off the PUP list at the very beginning of training camp. So he had to get acclimated, and most of his acclimation was coming along the sidelines, reading a play card. And so he's the guy who you pay $9 million a year to come in, create turnovers, and he's not acclimated. And also, I'm thinking of all these thoughts as I'm talking, but he essentially had to play babysitter in week 1 for Patrick Robinson.
Yes.
He stood behind Patrick Robinson, and they bracketed Julio Jones. So it's not like he was able to go out and freelance and do the things he can do. Exactly. Right. So I think once they get that solved, I'm assuming Corey White's going to stay the starter, and you're going to see more Kenny Vaccaro playing more nickel cornerback. And it's going to allow Jarris Byrd to maybe freelance a little bit more because, like I said, he was babysitting for about a game and a half through his first couple weeks with the Saints in the regular season.
866-3200 is the phone number. Let's head to the phone lines. Wallace is in New Orleans. Wallace, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, how you doing, my man?
Hey, Wallace.
I'd like to know if there's anybody out there, another cornerback, that the Saints can get, because it's not working with Patrick Robinson at all. And I don't think Corey White is ready for the, stick a person one-on-one yet. You know what I mean? So there's no cornerbacks out there the Saints can get, because that's what we need. We need a cornerback out there who can play man, who just can hold their own,
Wallace, thank you for the phone call. Chad, they brought in Derek Cox this week, right?
Well, and I'm also thinking of one rookie, Stanley Jean-Baptiste, who they're really not ready to give him a chance, but why not? I mean, if Patrick Robinson's not going to be your guy, and if he's going to hurt you in a game situation, maybe let the young rookie take a stab at it. Maybe throw him into the fire and see if he can produce. Sometimes young people surprise you in the NFL. You know, they may have certain, you know, just expectations for this young guy that we need to bring him along slowly. But Peyton said today that, you know, he's coming. He's working in practice to try to compete for a role out there in the field. So I say maybe it's time to see what the rookie can do.
Chad, I love you, but that would be an awful idea. Stanley Jean-Baptiste is not ready to play.
It's a project.
There's a reason why today Sean Payton just kind of...
He downplayed it.
Right, because I asked him about it.
Right.
And he's basically said, look, he's working his way back. His non-answer tells you he's not ready. The fact that undrafted rookie Brian Dixon is playing ahead of him and playing ahead of Patrick Robinson shows you that, A, Robinson is demoted. Trust me, Wallace, Patrick Robinson is not your starter anymore. Now, I think Corey White gets a bum rap. I think he's solid. I don't think he's some game breaker, but I think he's solid.
Makes enough plays.
Right. It's not like you can't expect him to be the shutdown guy. He's not that, but he's the best option you got. Trust me, if there was somebody out there in free agency, they would go get him. But I'm going to tell you this, Stanley Jean-Baptiste, I talked to him today, and I said, look, what do you think you need to do to get on the field? And he says, I don't know. And he basically feels like he's kind of in limbo, and you can almost see it's taking an effect on him, and he's not used to not playing, and he doesn't know what to do. And to me, I don't think there's anything he can do this year to get on the field. I think he's basically a redshirt this year.
I agree with you because, again, 2 years at Nebraska, struggled a little bit in preseason, technique-wise. He needs a year to kind of get the feel for what the cornerback position in the NFL is about. But with that said, I mentioned this last week on this program and on the radio show. Man, in a year where you got Super Bowl aspirations, you know, how do you miss on making sure that you had somebody at that number 2 cornerback position? It's not like you didn't know this. You saw what happened last year when Jabari Greer went down. You guys were in camp. You watched the battles at the cornerback position. Obviously, Champ Bailey was injured. It was hard to get him on the field. Patrick Robinson, again, and I've talked about this in terms of the situation with anytime you're going against your own team and it's a practice situation, you know the guy across from you, his moves. But, man, this seems like just a big miss on the Saints' part in the offseason to make sure that they had a solid number 2 corner.
Yeah, I think, and Sean Payton, it seemed like he had a lot of faith in Champ Bailey. I remember catching up with him, I think it was at the Zurich, right after Champ Bailey had signed. And he said, look, he loved what he saw on tape from him in 2012. Well, that seems like 53 years ago. And he didn't play well. He lost a starting job in Denver, got cut for a reason. And so, but I think they really thought Champ Bailey had something left in the tank and was going to come in and play. And here's the thing, people are screaming, what about Champ Bailey? Why don't they bring him back? They missed. Well, guess what? 31 other teams, if they were looking for an upgraded corner, he'd already be on a team. And now there's reports this week, basically, I'm sure stemming out from his agent, he's willing to do anything. He's willing to play nickel corner. He's willing to play safety. That wasn't the story 5 months ago. And so, look, And here's the thing, you bring up practice. Patrick Robinson, he looked good in practice.
He did.
I think it's the
During
same.
camp.
Yeah, it's the same sort of thing with a Nick Toon. They look good in practice. You get them under the lights. It's a different story.
Going back to April and May when the NFL draft was upon us, I remember a lot of talk. The Saints were going to target one of these standout corners, Jason Verrett out of TCU, or is it Kyle Fuller out of Virginia Tech?
Guys,
who's
he
now
looked
playing
pretty good now.
very well for the
Yes.
Chicago Bears. And all of a sudden, they fell in love with Brandon Cooks, who has been very dynamic and could possibly be Rookie of the Year
and was
in this
much
system.
needed on the offense.
Right, and he brings that added dimension to this offense, which will be great. But did you need that more than you needed a solid second cornerback? Obviously, so far through 3 games, it's looking like they missed on that, but I still like Brandon Cooks on this roster. Yeah. It just pains us to think that they could have selected a Kyle Fuller, who really could have made a difference for this team.
Well, Fuller went ahead.
He went early.
Cooks,
yeah, he did.
And if he was there, they're taking him.
Okay.
But Cooks, they needed Cooks. So here's the thing: you needed both.
Yeah.
And you gotta pick one or the other. Which weapon was there? Like I said, I think Kyle Fuller would have been obviously great for the Saints, but he went a little earlier. And the Saints, they could only trade up so far.
Right.
And here's the thing: look at the offense. outside of Cooks and outside of Jimmy Graham, who do you have in the passing game right now? Because there's not much. So imagine if you don't have Cooks and Kenny Stills is hurt, Marcus Colston is looking older by the day, Robert Meacham's not doing much, Joe Morgan was active last week and never touched the field, Nick Toon is not playing, and Mark Ingram's. Imagine if you didn't even have Cooks. So it's almost like pick your poison. But at that time, look, they had Patrick Robinson, who they had some sort of faith in.
Right.
They had Champ Bailey. They had some other guys that they liked. They figured they would take a corner, so they went in the second round. Doesn't look like they've hit on that corner right away. So I think they made the right pick with Cooks, but again,
you
if
agree
Full
with
was
that?
there, he could have been there.
Exactly. And I just think it's a shame that the Saints' biggest weaknesses have been exploited that much through 3 games. I mean, sometimes you can hide a weakness, but
With a pass rush, you can hide that corner
but
weakness.
through 3 games, they've been exploited and then some. And clearly, the Saints secondary is just not playing up to its potential. And I still think they can get much better as the season wears on. As Jarris Berg becomes more comfortable in the system, as his teammates have proper alignment and just reads and being in the right spot, I think the defense will finally start to come around and play more like the team that we saw a year ago.
I think I'm going to have to have Rob Ryan basically reverse course. He didn't want Kenny Vaccaro doing more and playing the role he played last year, because Kenny Vaccaro, he felt like did too much. And last year, he played a lot of nickel cornerback. He did this, he did that. And he wanted to get that away from him, and he felt like maybe they would have the corners to do it. Well, guess what? I think they need to reverse course, go back to some of the things they did, play Raphael Bushmore, have 3 safeties. And you started seeing that with Minnesota game, and so maybe if they go back to what they kind of knew, maybe this team will get back on track.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'll add this thing about Brandon Cooks. We saw the void, the lack of real speed, a speed guy on this offense last year, even though you had Sproles in the lineup, and especially with the wide receiver position. Everybody can talk about Stills and his deep ball ability and Morgan, et cetera, because Morgan was injured last year. I think Cooks was a necessity, and I think he's proven it right now. He makes the wide receiving core undoubable. If that's, you cannot double them now across the board. If that's a word. I mean, it is really tough to double that wide receiving core, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of single coverage on receivers right now, because it's pick your poison. If you're going to double Jimmy Graham, somebody else is going to be open.
Right, and that's really the main thing that Cooks brings you, and he's the most versatile guy to have on offense. He's not Sproles, but to me, he could become more effective because he's more of an every down player. Sproles is not, but that's the thing. If you, like I said, imagine if you didn't have Cooks. This offense, the passing game, you take out Jimmy Graham, you take out everyone, and so the offense. I think that's part of the problems as well. Look, the running game's going, but you run into a hiccup, and then the offense goes away for 2 quarters, and so. Look, it's across the board. We talked a lot about defense already, but it's across the board where there are problems. And when's the last time the Saints, their worst performance in 3 games on offense, happened at home?
Right.
That just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've been spoiled by teams in the past. And Drew Brees mentioned that yesterday, that not only are they playing against the opposing defense, but they're also playing against that measuring stick. I mean, this was a franchise that led the league in yards 4 times, twice in scoring under Sean Payton. We're just used to that dynamic, high-flying attack. Meacham down the seam and down Jimmy Graham down the middle of the field. Sproles doing all these things. Clearly, he's not here anymore. So Brandon Cooks is a valuable asset in this offense. What's really exciting about him, he's one of the more eager young players in this league. Just a humble kid. He knows he's talented, but hungry to improve, to reach that next level. And I think being around Drew Brees, that's rubbed off on him that, look, kid, you're good, but you can be great.
Yes.
And I'm going to help take you there. But he's like a sponge, Drew says, that he wants to absorb everything he can to take his game to the next level.
Yeah. Guys, Jonathan Goodwin goes down. I want to tell you right now, the first couple of weeks of the season, I thought the offensive line was as physical as I've ever seen it. He goes down with the high ankle sprain, probably be out a few weeks. That's a tough injury to come back from, especially in the trenches. Lolito comes in. Obviously, the debut was not great with the snap, but it looked like he settled down a little bit. But again, it took the Captain Mutterlin body slam to kind of get this offense back on track and motivated. Chad, I'll take you first. Any concern about this offensive line going forward with Lolito at center?
I think because of the competitive battle they had during training camp, that serves the Saints well in this matter of depth and filling in. Clearly, Tim Lelito was almost the guy going into the season. I think Goodwin outplayed him down the backstretch of camp through the preseason and won that starting job. Of course, his veteran presence brings a lot to this team as well. And Larry can talk at length about Tim Lelito and his ability and shifting over from guard and his potential as a center, but I think they've got good depth there. And as long as the rest of your line maintains their health, as long as you don't lose Streiff or Armstead on the left side, I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, and Tim Lelito, I think that's a great point that you brought up, that the fact that he was taking one's snaps and rotating a lot with Jonathan Goodwin. I think that tells you something, man. Look, I'm blaming Drew Brees. You got to catch the ball. I mean, it's not like the ball was 50 feet over your head, and Drew took the blame in the post-game press conference, but he should have. Look, it wasn't like the crowd noise is a problem. He saw the ball coming, it flew by him, whatever. But you did see a bit of a drop-off, though, when Lelito came in, had a bit of a more pass rush, couldn't run the ball as effectively. Now, I think Lelito, he's gonna start this week. Jonathan Goodwin's not going to play. He's missed practice the last 2 days. This week's out, but
you can't mess with that high ankle sprain.
No, not especially where he is.
Yes.
Well, you really can in any position, but not there. And so I think going in knowing that he's going to be part of the game plan, and it's not like he doesn't know the offense. So I think they can maintain what they do, but still. They got to avoid some of these lulls. I mean, Brees has been protected. The run game has worked. A lot of that's predicated on the offensive line. But again, you cannot have these lulls, and that's not on offensive line. That's missing a block here, a tight end missing a block, and blows up a running play. And so it's like, again, it's Sean Payton. It's not cliche. He says it's situational football. He's right.
When you have the opportunity to put a team away earlier in the game, you need to take advantage of it. You can't let them hang around because as well as the Saints played initially against the Vikings, Minnesota still had a chance before the Munnerlyn slam to one big play, come back and steal that victory from them. And then we'd be talking about 0-3, the sky's falling for the Saints. So fortunately, they were able to correct course to finish. And the guys were talking about that today, those final drives, the touchdown drive, but then to run the clock out toward the end as well and drain that clock. It's important to finish and not allow an opponent to come back and bite you.
We've talked a little bit about what Brandon Cooks has brought to the table. The most impressive thing to me offensively has been the running game. Every one of those running backs that have been in that backfield have performed for this team. Obviously, it starts up front with the offensive line, but it's been a physical running style. They have not been predictable as they've been in the past. Larry, your thoughts on the running game? Last week, 35 passes, 32 runs, man. I mean, how many times do you see that with a Sean Payton offense? Right,
exactly. And you look at actually the offensive numbers. The Saints are only one of two teams entering this week where their run offense and their pass offense are in the top 10. The other one is Washington. And so that is extremely rare for a Saints team for that to happen. But they know that's the way they need to go. And you're right. It's not just one guy, two guy. It's all three running backs. And here's, I might stun you here. I do think the Saints against the Vikings, I think they missed Mark Ingram. They rushed for their lowest run total. They didn't average 4 yards a carry. Kyrie Robinson didn't average 4 yards a carry. I think they actually will miss Mark Ingram. And I know people are saying, a year ago, people would have said, you're out of your mind. But I think they do miss him, especially because, look, Kyrie Robinson I think he took 18 carries. He's never done that in an NFL game. And you saw Pierre Thomas. They had to take him out of the Sproles-esque role. So they had to put him more back as a traditional running back because the first couple of games, he's out in as a wide receiver, and he's running routes, and that's not what they envision for him. But look, overall, you cannot complain about the running game.
There's been that balance. They don't want to get one-dimensional. We've seen that in the past. Too many times when Brees is chucking it 40, 50 times a game, it becomes a one-sided ball game. So it's tough to not have Mark Ingram. I mean, he was off to a fantastic start to the season, 6 yards a carry. We've talked at length about this being his contract year.
Physical running style.
His mentality maybe just changed. Maybe he just realized, this is my last go here with the Saints. This is the team that drafted me in the first round. Obviously, he's not lived up to that first-round billing, those expectations. This is his last chance to earn a big contract moving forward in his career, because what's the shelf life of an NFL running back?
Right.
Maybe 4 or 5 years on average. So it's a shame that they lost him so early. Hopefully he can come back. I thought it was pretty interesting when Peyton was detailing his injury last week. Got pretty specific with the screws above the thumb and whatnot. But, hey, he's a tough kid.
And
he
played
played
through it, right?
through it. He played through it because that injury happened early against the Browns. But they're going to miss him for at least a few more weeks, it seems.
I would agree. I mean, I was maybe the guy that wanted to give him the plane ticket out of town more than anybody. And he has developed as a bona fide NFL running back. He's patient. He may not be a guy that could break a lot of tackles, but he's physical and he finishes off runs. And look, he's done a great job for the Saints. We're going to take a break. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE TV with our live broadcast at 6 o'clock. You can catch the rebroadcast each and every Friday night, 10 p.m. here on WLAE TV and also Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette. 504-866-3200 is the phone number if you'd like to get involved in the program. Larry Holder and Chad Sabadie are our guests tonight. We'll be right back.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. At Natal's Air Conditioning, our motto is service honoring the golden rule. We're dedicated to providing the best air conditioning solution for your home or business in the New Orleans metro area. More information is available at 504-821-0005. Natal's Air Conditioning, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight on our panel, Larry Holder, columnist for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and Chad Sabadie, reporter anchor for Fox 8 Sports here in New Orleans. Guys, offensively, you got to give Breeze a lot of credit. Last week, even when the line looked like it was breaking down, as always, making time with his feet, making some miraculous throws, hitting 8 different receivers. The only knock on him thus far is the inability to be able to get the deep ball. Larry, take you first. Is that a problem? Is the deep ball, the lack of, a problem for this team right now?
Well, I think it is. And they thought that getting a Brandon Cooks and then having Joe Morgan be healthy, they thought that that would return. And it hasn't. And here's the thing. I'm not jumping on the mob to where they're saying, Drew Brees' arm, it's broken. He's got like,
the oblique train.
He's got Rodney Dangerfield. Oh, my arm, it's broken. I can't throw it anymore. I'm not going to get the mob mentality and say Drew Brees, his arm strength's gone. No, I just think, in some of the routes, it's not like Joe Morgan and Robert Meacham have been open. And B, teams are taking that away. I mean, when you put 9 defensive, you drop back 9 in the coverage like Cleveland did, you can't. You got to take what's given to you, and hence why Jimmy Graham had such a huge game. Yes. But here's the thing. You got to at least hit on some of these, because otherwise teams know, okay, well, they're going to do the intermediate passing game, and I think it lacks one of the major dynamics that the Saints offense had the last several years.
He always seems to take a few shots, doesn't he, Chad?
In week 1, he did. I remember a few balls. One was deflected by an Atlanta defensive back, and Joe Morgan was there, Robert Meacham was there. But the past 2 weeks, we just haven't seen it. And like Larry said, sure, you're going to take what the defense gives you and check down and hit the open man, because that's Drew Brees' favorite receiver, of course, the open man. But when your longest completion against the Browns, I believe, was only 23 yards, just something's bizarre with that. And then in this past game against the Vikings, I think it was Josh Hill's touchdown reception. That was just barely over 30 yards. So clearly it's a dimension of this offense that they need to get to that next level that we know they're capable of. And look, Drew Brees is 35. He'll be 36 in a few months. He's on the decline, the downslope of his career. I mean, it's just a fact.
Cannot run for all the time.
He cannot continue to throw for 5,000 yards each and every year. He might get to it this year, but you never know. But his arm strength will fade over time. And I do think, maybe he's not playing as comfortable as he would have been had he not had that oblique strain. Maybe he's working his way back from injury. Because just think of, the psychological effect of any kind of minor tweak in your system. Maybe you're not feeling 100%, and that can carry over throughout the course of the season.
Sure. Guys, special teams, I'll ask. Right now, kickoffs, not really doing much. Last week, in terms of the punt return game, Brandon Cooks wasn't able to generate any type of yardage. Patterson had a field day, taking balls out that were in the end zone. I think he had 30 yards a return. Larry, any concerns about this return game? Let's throw in the missed extra point as well. That's a problem as well.
Well, let's start with the missed extra point, and Sean Payton was asked about it on Wednesday. And he basically just said the kick was low. And here's the thing. That kicker battle, they kept Shane Graham. I honestly thought Derek Dimke outplayed him, but I guess he needed to so far outplay him to where they would get rid of Shane Graham. I don't have, honestly, a ton of confidence in him. And then you mentioned the return game. It's tough when you are catching punts and you're going backwards every time. The Saints rank 32nd in the NFL in punt returns with a negative 2.5 return average, and that's only on 2 returns because Jarris Bird's back there making fair catches, and Cooks is trying to make too much happen. So obviously that aspect hasn't helped, and it's not like Travaris Cadet frightens me. So honestly, they could probably allow him to field some kicks, but they haven't had really many opportunities.
There haven't been any opportunities in the kickoff return game. 4 for 4 were touchbacks last week. I like Cadet to just maintain possession and not do anything too crazy, and maybe that's all they're really wanting for. Just get the ball past the 20, get us in decent field position, and in the punt return game, just don't hurt us. Don't cost us a costly turnover, a fumble that can really lead to a 7-point swing for the opposition. So Brandon Cooks, I think, is dynamic. We all agree on that. I think over time he can possibly learn to be a great NFL return man, but he's not there yet. He's got to find those holes, and he's really got to rely on his teammates to set up those blocks.
Some have called for Joe Morgan to return kicks for this team. Chad, your thoughts? Is it a possibility? Do you think he can do it? Did he do it in camp?
He did a little bit. He was back there. He was in the rotation. I like his speed. I like him being healthy once again, but he just hasn't had much playing time. I mean, not too much positive tread on those tires. They really need to maybe give him a shot. That's not a bad idea. At least see what he can do. Perhaps give them a spark in an area that they really could use one.
As far as the kick return game, I'm with you. Why not? Because Travaris Cadet, and we didn't really see much from Darren Sproles last year. What does it hurt you? As long if he can catch the ball and take a knee if need be, why not? But here's the thing. Joe Morgan, he's got kind of on the borderline of being inactive every week. They suited him up last week, and he never touched the field, not once. 0 snaps in special teams, 0 snaps within the offense, and so. You got to get on the field to get a chance, and obviously he's not showing them something. Otherwise, they know the return game has been sluggish. So you figure if he were ready to go and they felt capable, he'd be in there.
A lot of Saints fans making the trip up to Arlington to be able to see the Saints play in Jerry's World. Guys, break it down for us. Larry, I'll take you first. What do the Saints have to do to get a victory in Dallas, and what does Dallas bring to the table?
Well, Dallas is certainly a better team than what we saw last year when the Saints blew them out. Their defense is much different, and hey, they do have some internal problems as far as Mo Claiborne just wants to leave practice. Oh, that's not a good idea. He's still going to play, but he's not going to start. But look, I think the major key is the defense has to finally create a turnover. The stat keeps growing. They've only created 5 turnovers. Including the playoffs in their last 14 games. That goes back to Week 9 last year. The Saints are 7-7 in that span. Tony Romo, he can throw an interception 2, 3, 10 if you get on his case. And DeMarco Murray, he's the leading rusher in the NFL, and yet he's had fumble problems. So they are prone to make mistakes. the defense has got to make them pay. So honestly, the pressure isn't all on the offense, because if it stays to where it's no turnovers and the Saints are losing the turnover battle every week, the games are going to be back and forth, and you're not going to know who's going to win or lose.
Complementary football, exactly that. You can't rely on your offense to score 30-plus points each and every week. They're capable of it. They did it against Atlanta. They weren't quite as effective against Cleveland, and they hit that big lull against Minnesota. But we know what the offense can do. It's up to the defense. It really is up to them to keep themselves in the game, not give up these big plays, these busted coverages. And if you can contain DeMarco Murray, look, he's having a fantastic season. They retooled that offensive line. They're really committed to the run as well, which is nice to see for the Cowboys, instead of Tony Romo just slinging it a bunch of times, because as many big plays as he makes, he'll hurt the Cowboys as well. And hopefully the Saints can take advantage of that, because if they do lose the turnover battle this week on the road, this is a game that you can easily lose. So they're going to have to play their best complementary football to win.
3-7 in the last 10 games on the road. Obviously, a lot of the communication issues you saw, the miscommunication on the road in the first 2 games. Schedule maker wasn't real kind to him, putting him on the road, but let's face it. I've said before, I think that Cleveland game could come back to haunt them down the line. That's one you shouldn't have lost. Your back's against the proverbial wall early in this season now. I mean, I really believe you've got to win the next 2 games to get to that bye week 3-2 and then be able to pick it up from there. Any thoughts, guys?
You can always get hot at the right time.
Right.
I mean, look at Eli Manning and the Giants a couple years back. You just catch fire late in the year. It all starts to click. But the odds of that happening are pretty slim. I mean, we threw out the stat. What is it? 0-2 teams make the playoffs 12% of the time.
Right.
You're not going to put too much stock into that. So clearly getting to 1-2, it was just one victory, but I counted 13 teams in the NFL are now 1-2, including San Francisco, including Green Bay. So some quality teams. Seattle's 2-1. So look, in the big picture, you've got room to improve, to climb out of this hole, but you can't continue to lose early in the season. Winning on the road is tough, but you at least have to steal 1 or 2 of these games to stay in the mix.
Yeah.
If the Saints fall to 1-3 and you're 0-3 on the road, I don't know when they win a road game. I'll be real honest with you, because they let 2 slip away. In Cleveland, you got to win. They've had success against Dallas. They've had success in Dallas.
Yes.
Even under Joe Vitt and Steve Spagnuolo, they went up and won. And you had Patrick Robinson on Dez Bryant, and they still won.
Yeah.
So I understand why people would have confidence going up against Dallas. And look, personally, I think the Saints are going to win, but if you lose this game, it is so rare to see what happened last year with Carolina. They started 0-2.
Right.
They started 1-3, and they still came back and won the division. But that is by far not the norm.
Yeah.
So I agree. They got to go 3-2, get to the bye week, and really start to stack some wins. Otherwise, it's going to be back and forth, and we'll be talking about something else in January, not Saints football.
That month of November is going to be tough when you got San Francisco, Cincinnati playing at a very high level, the Baltimore Ravens, and late October against the Packers here on a Sunday night. Those type of games can really go either way.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's shift gears. 866-3200 is the phone number if you'd like to get involved in the show. The LSU Tigers now 3-1. They lose to Mississippi State 34-29. Miraculous comeback, not enough. Guys, I've been saying it all along since the Wisconsin game. This team will go as far as the offense and defensive lines take them, and I didn't think that they were this bona fide, top-notch SEC West type offense and defensive lines. But there seems to be a little quarterback controversy now. Brandon Harris came in last week and did a really good job for this team. Jennings has been steady, but again, he's got some problems when it comes to the deep out in terms of the throws. Looks like Harris can make all the throws. Chad, you've been up to Baton Rouge covering this team. What are your thoughts?
2 biggest concerns, clearly your quarterback and your defensive line interior. When you lost Ego Ferguson and Anthony Johnson, who really didn't even play that great last year, you were in trouble, because they've got a lot of young guys, highly rated recruits in the system now, Christian Lockature, Quentin Thomas, Marquadius Bane, all these Frank Herron, Lewis Neal, but none of them have really blossomed into these game-changing type players. So they're getting run right up the gut. They're having a lot of communication issues defensively. Dak Prescott from Mississippi State, the great dynamic dual-threat quarterback, was able to exploit that at length, just running free, shake one tackle, and, man, he's running 60 yards into the end zone. But my big thing, can we get rid of these non-conference cupcake games? Because what do you learn when LSU plays UL Monroe? They're going to dominate a lesser opponent, but then when it comes to the real deal, an SEC opponent, you're going to give up close to 600 total yards. So clearly their defense isn't what people thought they could be back-to-back shutouts for the first time in a long time. But it does start with the quarterback offensively. Anthony Jennings, he's a tough kid. He took a bunch of tough shots,
Yes.
last week against Mississippi State, but that was an SEC caliber defense, and I think it'll take time for these young offensive weapons to grow. I mean, look, it's not Zach Mettenberger, it's not Beckham and Landry and Jeremy Hill, who are now all in the NFL playing for you on Saturdays anymore.
Right.
Honestly, here's the thing. You come back and you beat Wisconsin, and then all of a sudden, oh, wow, I think this LSU team might be better than I thought. Well, guess what? They could have easily walked out of there with a loss,
Yep.
and we would have been talking about some mix-ups earlier on because LSU was fortunate to win that game. That could have easily been Mississippi State.
Right.
And this could have been the second time this could have happened. And so I feel like the expectation level, I think we're seeing what probably we expected before we saw Wisconsin. There's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some breakdowns.
Right.
And you bring up Ego Ferguson. I mean, he's making plays for Chicago.
Yep.
He's in their regular rotation guy. Anthony Johnson wasn't drafted, but
Right.
he's on the Dolphins. I mean, we can go. What is it? 22 guys they've lost in the NFL draft. I mean, this
it
was
catches up
bound
to
to
you.
happen.
It's taken its toll. You can't say it hasn't. They've been able to reload at the skill position, but the interior offensive defensive line, it takes time. Weight room, growing, learning the system, and I think a lot of people thought that it was just look, that they've been able to reload every year. Why not this year? Well, this is kind of the year I think that they've got to kind of grow, and it's a rebuilding year, even though Tiger fans don't want to hear it.
What's really disappointing has been the play of the offensive line because you lose your quarterback, standout receivers, and tailback, and some defensive players. So the strength of this year's team, a veteran offensive line. You got a senior left tackle who bypassed the NFL draft, came back for his senior year. You return 4 starters. There's plenty of depth there. They're not a great running team right now, and that's the mindset of the head coach, that we're going to be this power, great running team. So schematically, Cam Cameron, offensive coordinator, to his credit, they were fantastic last year. They need to change things up. I mean, they need to realize what personnel they do have and be more efficient with what they've got.
I think it just shows me how good Trey Turner was.
Yeah.
And he came in and he's starting right away in the NFL. And so, you mentioned 4 starters. He's the one that's missing.
Yeah.
And he's that almost Jari Evans type of guard, who Carl Nix type of guy who can really open those holes and create for any running back you have. And so maybe that one guy, I mean, they might miss him more than anybody.
Well, all off season long, we heard that, again, they were going to, because of the youth, especially at the skill positions, they were going to ride this offensive line, going to get in the eye, smash mouth, and be able to protect the quarterback. It's pretty obvious when you look at, you got to throw the 2 cupcakes out. You look at Wisconsin, you look at Mississippi State, they're not able to do that. The question is, and again, 2 great coordinators on this team in the Chief and Cam Cameron. Now, will they adjust, especially on the offensive side? Will we see more of a spread offense? Spread the defense out, use those weapons, get that quarterback on the edge, no matter which quarterback it is, because I don't think they can line up against the Alabamas or the Ole Misses of the SEC and just ram it down their throat.
Well, here's the scary thought. Mississippi State looked fantastic against LSU, but State, in reality, may be the 4th or 5th best team in the SEC West. So what does that say about LSU? You've got Bama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and then you still have to go to Florida.
Yeah.
So none of these games, LSU at this point will be a favorite in, except for maybe when they host Kentucky in October. It's going to be interesting to see if they make these adjustments. They almost have to, because as good as State's defensive line is, and they've got one of the better front sevens defensively in the SEC, when you play against Bama with one 5-star recruit after the next, and Auburn under Gus Malzahn continue to recruit at a high level, and Texas A&M under Kevin Sumlin are bringing in more and more dynamic playmakers, they've got to adjust. They've got to find out what works for them, because when you don't have a stable hand at quarterback, you've really got to rely on what do you do well, and that's getting the ball to these playmakers. A Traven Durrell, who's got speed for days. A Malachi Dupree, who we're very excited about, the local product from John Curtis, and he can really stretch the field and make some catches as well. But you've got to utilize your backfield. I mean, look, these are 4 potential NFL running backs all in the same backfield, but you've got to set the blocking up, and you need to be less predictable with your play calling to allow them to have some success.
You mentioned the spread formation, spread it out. I don't know if a team would even respect it, because I don't think if they respect either quarterback to really make the throw and make it happen. So you're almost stuck right now, because Zach Mettenberger, when's the last time before him, and they don't have it after him? He's not a quarterback that LSU fans and opponents are used to seeing from this team. They're used to seeing that running. And if you can't have the quarterback and your skill position players, I mean, you got one or two, but you're used to having 3 or 4. If teams aren't going to respect that, they're going to load up. And so what do? I mean, you've got to win in the trenches. If you can't do that, you're in trouble.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see what he does with the quarterback position. We talked about it a little bit briefly early. You know, Jennings has got a little bit more experience. Harris looks like he's got more ability in terms of the throws. And I'm not sure how he's going to do the rotation against New Mexico State. But, you know, what you saw to Harris last week may be a precursor to what we may see down the line here, because he has the ability to make those deep outs, to again, stretch the field with his arm where Jennings doesn't.
There's no doubt Brandon Harris is a talent. I mean, we saw this kid play for Parkway last year out of Shreveport, led his team to the undefeated season state championship game. The ball just flies off of his hand. I mean, he's got a cannon for an arm. He can be very accurate at times, but he's a young player with potential. He may not be ready for the rigors of the SEC. Not to say that Anthony Jennings is either, because he's a young guy as well. He's had minimal experience. So, unfortunately, when you've got 2 quarterbacks, sometimes you really don't have one, and that seems to be the case. Jennings will start this weekend, but I think you need Harris to at least take some meaningful reps, because in those first few games, Wisconsin was a disaster for Brandon Harris. Played 3 snaps, nothing went right.
Very nervous.
He played very minimally in the next 2 games as well, and didn't really play until this last game against Mississippi State. But keep in mind, they were playing prevent defense at the end,
that's true.
really giving them some underneath routes. And to his credit, he made the throws. Is he the future of this offense? I think he is, but he needs some time to develop. And I think this entire season will be a learning, growing experience.
I can't believe we're talking about LSU having 2 quarterbacks and you don't know who to play because you don't trust either one of them.
That's never happened before.
This is what? I mean, I can't believe they didn't learn and go. I think it's the story of Les Miles' career. I mean, this goes back to Jamarcus Russell and Matt Flynn. I mean, it's can we get a quarterback in here? Can we? I mean, they got Mettenberger. They finally got it, but they stuck with what they have. To me, I think both guys are inexperienced. I mean, there's no question about that. But who has the livelier arm? Who may make the better decisions? At this point, again, this is me. I don't watch LSU every day, but I almost feel like I've seen enough out of Jennings. I want to see more out of Harris. Why not give him the bulk of the snaps at least in this game and see what happens?
Well,
Give him a chance.
That's the way I'd go, honestly. You know pretty much what you have in Jennings. What you don't know is what you have in Harris. New Mexico State is going to be a win. If it's not, then the sky is falling. So let's see what the kid can do and give him a chance to get under center and maybe a little bit under duress, and we'll see what happens. The Tulane Green Wave 1-3. I was really disappointed in how they performed at Duke. They lose 47-13. And guys, I'm going to tell you right now, we know that Curtis Johnson is kind of learning on the job to be a head coach. But he started channeling his inner Sean Payton last week. You know, the big back Thompson is just running rampant through the Duke defense. And then, of course, they start passing and throwing the ball. And, I love Tanner Lee, but again, he's a young player, and he believes in his arm and getting those balls in those small windows. Ultimately, he's turning the ball over. He's hurting his team.
Yep.
But, man, for the life of me, I just was really upset by the fact they did not stay with the running game, because they were really making hay with it. Chad, you've covered this team. Your thoughts on Tulane. Again, Chad, especially last week, just not sticking with the run.
Well, it's a similar problem. When you have a young quarterback, you have a young mentality. He doesn't have that experience to say, this is clearly what's working. We're going to continue to lead this. And part of it's play calling as well. But he does have a gunslinger mentality. And he has cost his team in multiple games now, multiple pick sixes going back for touchdowns. And you just never want to see that, because it totally changes the complexion of a ball game. And you go from being competitive to being climbing out of a hole that you just really can't climb out of. So between Lizedrick Thompson and Sherman Beatty, look, these are great running backs that you need to use, and your offensive line has been solid enough. There's no shortage of weapons for this offense. Their key is efficiency. Don't turn the ball over. Just move the ball down the field and let your defense, with some playmakers as well, try to keep you in it. I think Tulane overall is going to be outmanned in this American Athletic Conference. I mean, it's tough. And then when you're playing out of conference against Duke and Rutgers, you're not doing yourselves any favor. I mean, the schedule is just really tough. At least they got the win over Southeastern. They played well in that game. But it starts with your quarterback, and you just cannot turn the ball over.
Well, last year, They didn't have great quarterback play.
Right.
They relied on defense so much.
Yes.
I don't think they can do that this year, and maybe that is part of the mentality. Okay, our defense isn't as good as what we were accustomed to last year. Maybe we feel like we got to take some chances on offense. Maybe we feel like you got to make some big plays, throw it down the field to compensate. Because it's not like the defense has stopped everyone. It's not the same unit as last year.
No, not close.
So maybe that's part of it.
Right.
But it's something where I think if your expectations were that they were going to repeat what they did last year, I think you were mistaken.
Yeah.
But it's something where you're in a new conference, the competition, some of it's similar, most of it's tougher. So you had to expect growing pains after an unexpected season.
I agree
year.
with both you guys, but I also believe that when you're running the football like they've been able to run the football, you can protect that defense.
Sure.
You can protect that young quarterback, and I think they got away from it. It really hurt, especially, the self-inflicted wounds. They have hurt themselves with penalties, mistakes that again, cost them the opportunity to stay in games. Maybe not win games, but to stay in games. And then the problem with the special teams, again, from the lack of a field goal kicker to the snaps to the coverage units, I mean, that's been an Achilles heel for this team.
From game one, when
Yes.
they're on the road against Tulsa, and you've got a chance to win that game-winning field goal, doesn't connect, and then you eventually lose in, multiple overtime. Really a missed opportunity there because that was a winnable game. They were competitive in that. The things you take for granted in football, just a sound kicking game. You see it now with our prep show on a Friday night. So many teams cannot complete, or the point after, cannot connect on that. It's just amazing that you cannot find a kicker, but it's just a crucial part of this game. So they have been shooting themselves in the foot. There's no denying that, and unfortunately, the schedule only gets tougher from here. There's a few winnable games for Tulane, but I'd be surprised if they don't finish with, if they do finish with more than 3 or 4 wins.
Well, and Larry, look, when they don't trust the field goal kicker, what they've been doing for it is going for it on 4th down, and they're leaving points on the field. I mean, this is, for a team that is struggling to get an identity and maybe trying to stay in games, you got to be able to have a field goal kicker that can put it through the uprights.
This year's field goal kicker, the worst thing that happened to him is that he's following up the best guy they've ever had, probably one of the best guys.
For sure.
Cairo Santos. And so, but here's the thing. I mean, some of these field goals, they're elementary. I mean, you got to, if you're on a scholarship, or even if you're a walk-on kicker and you're a starting kicker for a college team, you got to be able to kick a 20-yard field goal. And the fact that can't happen, really, it's inexcusable. And do you put it on the kid? Sure, but you put it on the staff. You got to find the right guy. I mean, you got to find a guy who can make that happen. And because here's the thing: if they win in Tulsa, maybe that momentum carries over. I mean, you win a big game on the road in a place. It seems like they've never won in Tulsa, and the fact that he was even that close, moral victory. But look, if you go out there and win it, maybe this complexion of this season might have been a little different. Maybe you don't blow leads that you had at home to Georgia Tech, and then you're in games at Duke.
The very next week against Georgia Tech, they were in that game, and then it was a couple interceptions and a pick six, which really turned the tide, because we were thinking Tulane's going to pull this upset. The first half, it was really close, and then it got away from them.
No doubt. Guys, thanks so much for being with us tonight on Inside New Orleans Sports. Larry Holder, Chad Sabadie, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for watching tonight. Again, there is a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE and Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette at 10 p.m. Also, you can catch me on the radio weekdays 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on 990 a.m. WGSO. You can also listen live or download my podcast at ericasher.com. And if you missed any of the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, you can check those out at ericasher.com as well. You can always follow me on Twitter at Eric_Asher. Special thanks again to Larry Holder and Chad Sabadie, and also the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juneau, and my director, William Hill. New Orleans, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week, 6 p.m. for Inside New Orleans Sports. Good evening.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504 304-4125 or brisbysrestaurant.com. At Natal's Air Conditioning, our motto is service honoring the golden rule. We're dedicated to providing the best air conditioning solution for your home or business in the New Orleans metro area. More information is available at 504-821-0005. Natal's Air Conditioning, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.